Welcome, everybody, to Razed Typical. It is a great evening. It's a great Tuesday night. And wherever you are, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight, we have a great guest, Michael Fullmer.
Welcome
to our show. What was the process like to get your book published? Because my mom is writing a book. Did it take a long time?
Yeah, it was a process. It took over a year to get it published. And that was over a year once we had agreed to, I found the publishing company and we had signed the agreement. And it's a lot of steps. You first of all have to sign an agreement so you have a clear understanding of what each other's role is and what the financial arrangement is.
Yeah.
Second thing is they go through the book and they do a brief overview of the editorial where they'll look at a couple chapters, come back to you and suggest, here are some things you may want to think about as you go through the book and create what's going to be your final edit before we do a full editorial review. So I did that line by line. I went through, did the edit, and I submitted it to them. Then they did the full editorial review with the professional editors.
Mm-hmm.
After the full review, then the next step was we started working on design. I made suggestions in terms of what the cover would look like. So the cover that I came up with, I found a photo that I just loved.
I love it.
Thank you. And so we worked on the design of the cover. We worked on the layout of the book. As I'm reviewing it, I'm looking at where the picture placement is to see if it hits right at the right flow of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so we go through that whole process. They finally do the final layout. You have to do approvals on the final layout. Then you start working on the promotional scheme. And I'm drafting text for the promotional scheme. So it was a lot of steps. As far as what I do a second one, it was a lot more work and required a lot more time than I had expected. As far as the second one, ironically, this actually is my second book.
Wow.
First one I never published. I wrote it. I had my vice president of editorial, who had retired, asked him to do the editing of it. Okay. I had a friend of mine had a friend who was a professional author, Christian author, who did a review and provided some comments.
Wow.
And just as it was all coming together and I was finalizing it, that's when the cancer hit and that became my focus. So I just never finished it. At some point I might. That probably scares my wife because she knows how many hours I spend in this office when I'm working on these things, but we'll see.
I love it. Yeah, that's something that we've talked about, right, with Mom, and she in her book, and we're leaning towards the idea of self-publishing only because if you get real popular, which we don't even know if that would happen, but if that were to happen,
never know.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah,
they always say publishers always want a second book, and Mom is like, nah, I'm a one and done. I'm a one and done. I'm not looking to do two.
You never know, Mom.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah, it's very time consuming.
Yeah,
it's very time consuming.
Yes, it really is.
For me, the writing part I love. For me, that's a passion. It has been for a number of years, but it's very consuming.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Just a quick shout out to all the viewers. Thank you for bearing with me with all the tech. We're still working on our sound and stuff. Hopefully it's all good now. Keep sending comments. If you have problems, we'll do our best to fix them. Just wanted to address that.
Yep.
Some very patient fans, which I appreciate.
Yeah, fans. Give it up for our fans.
Give it up for the fans.
All right, so I'll read the next question.
Okay.
So, do you have a good relationship with God when you are going through tough times? Because if we need to, we can pray at all times, even day or night. Was it hard to pray sometimes?
Yes, to answer your first question, my relationship with the Lord as we began our series of trials, my relationship was very strong. I love the Lord. I came to know the Lord when I was around 10.
Wow.
When I got into my late teens and early 20s, I drifted. and went through a little bit of period of rebellion, but Lord was incredibly patient and lovingly drew me back in my late 20s. And for years, I had studied God's word, prayed every day, studied his word every day. So my relationship was very strong. But one of the things that really shocked me was as we went through all these trials, there are things that you know, but they are sort of up here. But when you're going through the trials, they go here.
Wow.
And so God really used certain things that I knew and impressed upon my heart what that really meant. And then there were other things that I learned along the way. But and I should probably just outline the trials. I'll try to do it quickly, but there were a long series of trials. It started with my brother, who was diagnosed, Dan, who was diagnosed with Lewy body's dementia. Lewy body's dementia was a horrible, horrible disease. It attacks the body and eventually puts you in a wheelchair. It attacks the mind. It attacked my brother's genius IQ, and he started having memory issues, which he'd never had before. And then in the late stages, it gives you hallucinations. So, and then the life expectancy is 7 years, which is just how long he lasted. And around that time, we lost a whole bunch of other family members. His wife, Kathy, who Chris and I, my wife Chris and I were so close to. We did so much with Dan and Kathy. She was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer.
Wow.
And she died a year and a half after Dan did. We also lost Chris's mom to kidney cancer, her dad to cardiac condition. My younger brother, he called me one day. He's crying. I had heard him cry since he was a child, and he told me that he says, I said, "What are you crying about? What's wrong? What's wrong?" He said, "Sue." I said, "What about Sue?" "She's dead." I said, "She's what?" She had dropped dead of a heart attack.
Wow.
So we lost these countless family members, and then one day as Chris is coming home from running some errands, she stops at the end of the drive, gets out of the car to get the mail. As she gets out of the car, she thinks it's in park, slips into reverse. The door hits her, knocks her to the ground, and the front wheels swing around and run over her midsection. And she nearly died that night. We had a conversation with a physician. Well, she went through, after her accident, they rushed her to the hospital. They did surgery that night to stop the internal bleeding. They did second surgery to repair the femur bone in her right leg. And then they did a third surgery, which was the most challenging surgery, to repair the 4 broken areas in her pelvis area. And it was horrific. And so she spent 10 days in a hospital. She spent a month in a physical rehabilitation center. And then she spent a time at home, slowly working her way to wheelchair, then a walker, then a cane, and then eventually to walking again. But a recovery process for 3 years.
Wow.
And we'd just gotten in about a year out of that when I was diagnosed with cancer. And I had cancer in my cheek area, left cheek area. They were concerned. It was wrapped. It was wrapped, a lymph node that was wrapped around it, and it was right near a nerve bundle. So they went and did surgery. I had radiation therapy, and after several months, they declared me in remission. A year later, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and then I ended up in the hospital for 10 days, or I'm sorry, 7 days, and with getting chemo 24 hours a day for 5 straight days. Then I had follow-up sessions of chemo, was declared remission, and then a year later, the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was back. And And with that, I was in the hospital for a month the third time. Went through a stem cell transplant, and I had follow-up treatments after that. So it was a long, difficult period of trials.
Yeah.
As far as the prayer is the last question, was it hard to pray? Not for me. I prayed like I never prayed before. I spent so much time seeking Lord because it was beyond what I could handle. And
yeah, for sure.
I was just gonna say, that's incredible. Like when you went through that stuff, it reminds me of a movie. Like, do you ever think that? Like we talked about this at lunch yesterday. Do you ever think that your book should turn into a movie, and who would play you as you?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know if it'll ever turn into a movie. I mean, writing the book, I had one goal in mind, and that was there were so many things that the Lord taught me as I went through this, in so many ways that He helped me, so many ways He grew me, and I just wanted to be able to share it with others, so that if others are going through a difficult time, they would be helped by it. So that's been my goal all along, and that continues to be my goal. Now, I've gotten some encouraging feedback from a number of people, and so we're off to a good start. But that's my prayer, that God will just use it.
Yeah, it's honestly something that's so important in the sense of, I think from my perspective, there were a handful of people who had similar experiences to me. And they were like, hey, we're here, this was my experience. And all of those times and discussions and conversations were so helpful because I felt alone, even though I knew there were people around me. But having someone with a similar experience or some kind of relatable experience really made me feel like there were people that were around me. And interesting, it ties into my next question, and it was like, do you ever, or did you ever get to a place where it was like just like inconvenient or too hard to share the story? Because like for me, right, it's not this huge string of trials. It was kind of one thing, and so it's easy to say, this was my issue, and then there. But for you to have so many things back to back, were there times where you're just like, I just don't want to go into it?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good question.
That question.
It's funny. We are Chris and I lead a grief share group, and that's one of the things that we talk about a lot in grief share is sometimes it's just hard to share what you're going through. For us, I mean, one of the things that was interesting that came along, and again, this is one of the blessings that came along, was there's a service called Caring Bridge, which is on the internet, and Caring Bridge allows you to post updates on what's going on as you're going through a difficult period, difficult trial, and then share it with others. And when Chris had her accident, we started using Caring Bridge because people were calling me all day long. How's Chris doing? Is she okay? And all. And this way we were able to share, but reach a lot. We started telling everybody we knew about, hey, go to Caring Bridge if you want updates. And people still called me, and I still got some ongoing conversations, but we shared a lot. And it was interesting. The thing that was nice about it was, rather than being on the spot having to respond, it gave us an opportunity to reflect on it, think about it, and when we were ready to write a response to what was going on and put it up on the site. So it was a great blessing for us.
Yeah, that's a great use of technology in like the current world climate that we're in. I thought about something interesting and similar to that was just the idea of sharing experiences and what a great use of some, people complain about social media and the negative effects technology
or TikTok, for example.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But what a great way to use technology to share. And then really, I think from also a simple, like an easy term, you type it out once and then it's typed out. And so you don't have to, continue to discuss it and say it again and again. And that makes it easier for sure too.
So I'm just going to throw it under the not throw it under the but I just wanted to say the next question. When you were cancer free, did you jump for joy? Well, I would. That would be exciting news. How did the change go for you when you heard that news?
Well, it was interesting because it's a good question, and I had various stages. I mean, when I had the cancer in my cheek area, and then I had my last treatment. They determined that I was cancer free. They had this tradition where you go down, you ring this bell. I rang the bell, and I was excited. I thought, oh, thank you, Lord. I've had cancer. Check that box. And so that was the first time. The second time, after I had gone through the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, same process where you go through all of these different treatments, and then you go down, you ring the bell. I was celebratory, but at the same time wondering, okay, is this the end? Hopefully this is the end. I thought my cancer or my experience with cancer was already behind me. And here I had a second event. And a year later, to my surprise, I was lifting weights at the gym, and I felt this lump in my bicep. And I went to an orthopedic specialist. I thought it was something to do with something I pulled, and they did some tests and told me that cancer was back. So that would hit me hard. So that one hit me. Each time was a little more challenging. But when I finished, each time you get done, you say, oh, thank you. I'm so glad I'm done, because the treatment is hard. The people were so caring that did the treatment, but it was hard. But I'm now 5 years out, so praise the Lord. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, I know it's exciting. But I just one thing I think it's changed is I just count each day as a blessing. I don't know when the Lord's going to call me home, but every day I'm just thankful.
Yeah, that's definitely something. It's funny. I've been thinking about recently, like people, in my age bracket, I'll say 20 to 40. I'll group a giant group of people together. But I feel like for the most part, we can take that thought process for granted, because we really convince ourselves that like we're so young that they're like we've got so much time left. And it's not even always a conscious thing, right? It's not even like I'm just consciously throwing each day away. We just like convince ourselves that, I've got plenty of time. And so what's one day here and one day there? And so being in each moment, in each day, I think is a really essential way to live.
And then God could blow the trumpet tonight. He can go, dun, 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 dun.
That's true, Ben. He could blow right now.
That's very true, Ben.
In the middle of the show, everything goes dark.
Show could be over.
Let there be white Jesus. I'm just kidding.
Hey, look, I wouldn't mind. All right, I'd be ready. But I would also still, look, it's a whole different conversation topic. But like, that's like got to be a hard choice for the Lord, right? Like, when do you blow that trumpet? Because at what point do you say, like, all right, enough people, like that? To me, right? Like, that's the hard thing for me is like, do you wait 2 more days, 3 more days, 6 more years? It's like he knows when, of course, and he knows best for sure. But I'm very glad I have nowhere near that amount of responsibility.
You and I both.
Yeah. So I'm gonna throw Ben for a little bit of a loop here. I'm gonna switch some things around, but we're talking about it, and I'm interested in it. Has the flow of your trials, has it kind of created any anxiety that you may have another big trial like again? Has the fact that things have shown up again, has that created any kind of anxiety for you?
I mean, I will be honest. When I was after my third bout, as I would go and meet with the oncologist, I would get to the point I wasn't even thinking about it. I was going about busy with life, and then I would go in, I would get my tests, and I'm thinking, wow, well, I hope they're not going to find that it's back. But on a day-to-day basis, it didn't give me a lot of anxiety.
good.
I think, I was probably more anxious in the beginning. And I think that as time went on, I came to trust more that God had it, regardless of what the outcome, whether when he was bringing me home. But I just got, as I grew closer and closer to the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
I came to just be more trusting, I think. And we'll talk a little bit about trust a little later on, because there was an issue and a lesson I learned.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Sure. We have actually a question from a guest that I think follows this train of thought and is interesting for sure. So Megan Mascaro.
Yeah, I know her. She's from Movie Chat. Hi, Megan.
She asks,
hi, Megan.
Because you had all of these, we'll say, heavy trials, she says, little things like money or food not stress you out as much?
Megan, that is a great question. Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah, it's interesting. That was one of the things I think that changed in me. I am very much a planner, plotter, and I can really spend a lot of time focusing on the details. And I will not say that that's all gone away.
Sure.
But I think what it did is I went through all those trials. It made me realize, stop and think about what are the most important things. The most important things being my relationship with the Lord, most important things being my wife and my children, most important things being the people in my life that are dear to me. So it really helped me to reprioritize to a large degree. I'm not saying I always get it perfectly, but it was a wake-up call for me.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's something that, once again, you're right. It's a great question, Megan. I appreciate it, because
that was a great question.
I think that it's something that, especially right as Christians, like the Bible is pretty clear about the birds, having their food, and the flowers of the field are clothed, and so in the same context for us. But I struggle with that for sure. Like, that's something that I internally struggle with, and I'm a planner as well, and so I like to have things really all laid out. And then somewhere that specifically I think it's been hard to like manage and think through is from a business perspective. So we just started a business, and like how much of the business do I like say, all right, Lord, you take it and you run it, and then how much of that is me being lazy and not doing, like where's that line, And so that's somewhere that I've seen it recently, where I'm like, all right, where is the faith and where is the hard work, and what's the middle ground for
that's like me sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes.
Yeah. No, that actually is a really, really good question. I think, again, if you're a planner and a plotter, and you're type A, then it's great because you're organized, you're setting goals. I've always been very goal oriented, setting goals, and you're working towards them. And one of the things, and I was talking about trust earlier. I'll tell you one thing that happened, and I'll tell you another thing that I experienced. When I had my first meeting with the oncologist about the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, I met with my doctor, and first time I'd ever met her. And she's going through, you have diffuse large cell type B non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It started up in your clavicle area, spread through your gut. It's all over. And she said, it's pretty aggressive. And I said, well, how aggressive? She goes, very aggressive. She goes, you're in stage 4.
Wow. I
said, oh, okay. I said, so what's my prognosis? And she goes, well, let me tell you, we need to do some additional tests. She says, when we took some biopsies, we took samples of your lymph nodes, looked at that, but we need more material. We want to do some additional testing. She says, I don't want to say just yet. I said, well, but what's your sense? She goes, well, I really need to do some additional testing. Me being me, I said, so, but what's your prognosis? So finally she said, well, again, I think we need additional testing, but my sense is maybe 50-50. And with that, I try to catch my breath. I think there's a 50% chance that I'm going to be gone soon. I looked over at Chris. She was crying, and she's not a crier. And it shook me to the core. And so she said, by the way, she says, we're not sending you home. We're going to send you directly across the street. You're going to start your chemo treatments today. And we're going to give you treatments that last 24 hours a day for 5 straight days. She goes, I know it's a lot, but I want to try to get on top of this thing. So when I got to the hospital, my mind was spinning. And next day, I had a friend come visit me to the hospital, two friends, Ken and his wife, Lynn Kirkner, and they sat and I was sharing, listen, if I'm dying, I was thinking, I got to do this. If I'm dying, I think I got to do that. And if I'm dying, I got it. And if I'm dying, I'm looking over at Ken and he's squirming in the seat. He's thinking, I didn't come prepared for this. I just thought he was sick. I didn't know he was dying.
Right.
So that night, I thought about it and I thought, man, what I just put him through was terrible. And I prayed that night. I said, Lord, if you're getting ready to bring me home, I pray for 3 things, Lord. I pray you give me peace, help me to accept this. Secondly, I pray just take care of Chris and Tim and Jen, my family, and last, Lord, just help me to finish strong. Help use me however you can, whatever time I have left. And that was my prayer.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, that next morning, I had peace like I've never had in my entire life. But I want to tell you the other side of the story. The other side of the story is the company. I have a company that developed continuing medical education programs for physicians. I had it for 25 years. I've been in the healthcare industry for 40. And had a very successful period. And we were one of the highly respected companies in the medical education field. Sadly, when Chris had her accident, I decided to retire, come home, try to take care of Chris, the fellow who took my place, made some changes, did some things differently. Company started struggling, and suddenly the company started going into a tailspin. And as they went into the tailspin, I kept praying and said, Lord, I know this is your company. It's not my company. If you're getting ready to close the company, help me to accept it. But Lord, just help me to embrace whatever you have planned. Just help me to do my part, whatever that is. And I pray, just give me peace, Lord. I had no peace. And I prayed again, that same prayer, and I had no peace. And I prayed again, I had no peace. And eventually things started to get things turned around. Things started to get better. I sold the company. But my point is that I look back on that and I realized when I thought I was dying of cancer, there was nothing I could do about it. And so I just gave it over to the Lord. When there's things you can do about it, sometimes what you do is you say, Lord, I'm giving this to you. Then you take it right back. And say, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. I used to lay there awake at night with my mind stressing over things I've got to do. And so to answer the question, I think the balance that we all have to strike is making sure that we do the best we can possibly do.
Yes.
That we're seeking God in the process and giving the outcome to him, whatever it is, even if it's not what we want. And that's not always easy, especially if, Dan, you say you're type A and very driven as well. You know, you and I, we're the kind of people that struggle with that. Yeah. So it's a challenge for me. But I've learned that's what I have to strive for. And I'm still trying to learn how to do that and give it over to God on a regular basis.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
I was just going to say, I don't know how God does it, but when I pray, I go like, God, guide me to the right people. And he does. I'm like, I don't even know how he does it.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy.
There's no question.
Yeah.
There's so many times in my prayer.
Yeah, for sure. And I've said this in the past to Ben, but I've used Ben as an example for that childlike faith. Because there are things that to me, I'm like, that's never happening, Ben. And he's like, it probably will. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, just complete belief, and just unshakable belief, which I think is something to aspire to.
Absolutely,
for sure. So Colleen Bauer, one of our, I think Colleen's watched every show
and
so far.
Riley Bauer's daughter. Hello, Colleen.
Yeah, Colleen is the mom of Riley.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. And so she had a question that I think is interesting as well, and she was saying that basically in the midst of trials, it's easy to respond, God will provide, and I trust that.
Mm-hmm.
But she asked, how do you deal with the guilt of the times you maybe in your heart don't trust or don't believe, and then afterwards you think, wow, like, oh, how did I not trust or how did I not believe? Like, how do you deal with that guilt in that process?
Good question, Colin.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking it. Yeah, I think, we are all human, and God says that we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works God has planned in advance. But the fact that we are workmanship, you look at the different people in the Bible, none of them are perfect when they start, and none of them are perfect at the end, but they're growing. They're growing. And I think that's sort of the answer is there are going to be times where we're going to struggle. We're going to seek God. We're going to say, God, why? Why is this happening to me? And Lord, what am I supposed to do? And Lord, I'm scared of where this is going.
Yeah.
And I think, the Bible says, do not be anxious about anything.
Oh, yeah. I
but
love
everything.
That Bible verse.
Yeah. And Ben, you said you love that. But, we're supposed to give it all over to the Lord. But, the thing I think about is I think of Jesus when he was in the garden. He said, he asked his buddies, he says, pray with me. Because he knew what was coming. He knew he was about to take all the sin of the world on himself. He knew that he was going to be nailed to the cross and he was going to be whipped and all the things that were coming. But then he said, but not my will, but yours, Lord. And I think the lesson for me in that is that we're going to have anxious moments. I think the trick is when we have the anxious moments to admit them, to seek the Lord and say, Lord, help me with this. I'm really struggling. Help me with this. And we shouldn't feel guilty about having the anxiety or having the moments where we feel afraid. But the trick is to make sure that we're seeking God in the process.
Yeah.
And ultimately trusting that, okay, you've got this, Lord. You've got this.
Absolutely.
And it's all part of our growing process. And we're all in the process of growing and will be throughout our lives until we go home with the Lord.
Yeah.
That's so true.
I like that. That's a great quote. Like when I had COVID, I was going through a hard time, and I was just like, what am I going to do? God said, read the Bible. And he taught me to read, be anxious for nothing. And I was like, I needed that.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a similar experience. This was way before COVID, but I was working in a camp setting, and it was the first time that I was in like direct leadership, and like it hit me hard because in the past it had always been like me and somebody else, and so I could always lean on the other person if like things weren't going well or whatever. And the first time that it was really just me, I was like, oh man, like this stress is so different. And I was brought to the same verse in Philippians. I believe it's Philippians 4:6.
Yeah.
I believe. And be anxious for nothing
with thanksgiving, with
right,
gratitude.
with thanksgiving, I think is the key part there, which people kind of skim over that. But it's presenting your prayers to the Lord with thanksgiving, like being thankful.
Yes.
For those anxieties, those stresses, and that's something that I think I still struggle with, and I don't know I'll ever have complete control or power over, but I'll give that to the Lord and let him, and the Spirit fill me.
We just got another comment in.
Yeah, we did. So there's some good comments happening in the comment section. I appreciate that for sure.
Yeah.
All our fans are very appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah.
So to change gears just a bit, I wanted to ask, because you had mentioned that you had started this company and you had ran it for You say 20, 25 years?
25 years.
Yeah, right.
25, yep.
And so as we have just kind of embarked on this journey ourselves, what's something that you now know that you wish someone had told you at the beginning of the business process?
Good question. Well, I'll tell you two things. One that I didn't know, but a good friend of mine who had his own business suggested to me. He says it's really helpful to put together a business plan before you start your business, or as you're starting, but preferably before you start. And the business plan focuses on, what is your focus going to be? How are you going to distinguish yourself from other people who offer the same service? What resources do you need? Thinking about income, cash flow, thinking about all the things that you need to sort of think through as you plan this business. And you map it out as best you can. And you never get it exactly right, but it gets you thinking about things before you get there. The one thing that I didn't really understand, and came to understand as we got into the business, was the whole issue of cash flow.
Wow.
I had a sense of how much business I thought I could bring in the first year and how quickly it would come in. And it was reasonably accurate on that. We got a lot of business fairly quick. I was very fortunate. God blessed me in so many ways as I started this business. One of the blessings was I connected with I used to report to the president of another company I worked for in the UK. And the president's husband got talking with me, and that conversation led into a partnership. And he had all these medical societies that he had a relationship with. But so we decided to partner with the medical societies. Since I was a new business, nobody knew the company that I had just started because it was brand new. So it brought in a lot of business fairly quickly. The thing I hadn't anticipated was the payment issue. And I was getting a lot of business in, and people weren't paying me. I had some of these grants that we were working on. We had $300,000-$400,000 grants.
Wow.
Money was pouring out, and we weren't getting any money in. And we got 6 months into it. And Chris and I knew when we made the decision to start the business, we said, if this thing fails, we're probably going to have to start all over again, sell the house and start all over again. And we thought we were at the brink of that very thing. So prayerfully, I sought the Lord, and I said, Lord, I don't understand this. I said, if you're getting ready to close a business, I said, I prayed to you. I asked you if you really felt I should start the business. And I really felt you leading, sense you leading to start it. I said, but now it looks like it's about to close. If you are, help me to accept it. And the very next day I got a check, but which was an answer to prayer. But the thing I want to bring up is you got to think about the cash flow issues as well. And that, for me, at least, that was something I hadn't really thought through.
Yeah. When we started this whole process, one of my biggest advantages in discussing this with the family was once we start the business, it's not like we're renting office space or we have employees there was no overhead in the sense of
which is huge.
Right, it's so huge, which has been a big blessing. Because we've talked about with COVID, and Ben does a lot of speaking in schools. That's kind of the primary employer at this point. With COVID, more schools are concerned about assemblies and having gatherings of students. And so for a little bit, we were concerned as to how that would affect us, and would we see even any schools this second half of this year or the beginning of this school year. And I had just responded to my parents. I was like, we have things we can do as a company if we don't go into schools. We can practice this, we can do that, we can do this. And fortunately, since we had no expenses, it didn't matter if we didn't have that coming in. But I want to get to a place in which we could maybe employ someone that could go to schools with Ben and could kind of do some of that more micromanaging position work. And once we get there, we have that blessing of kind of starting where we don't have expenses so that we can get to a place where as we get expenses, we've got some of that figured out, which is good. So I appreciate that advice for sure. That's key for
and the hardest part is the first couple of years when you're launching something. It's the further down the road you get, the more you learn and the more established you become. So it's not fighting for every day.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm up late nights and doing some stuff for the company, getting more schools.
Ben likes to work those weird hours, but that's where when you're motivated, right?
Yeah. Christian Vogel said something.
Yeah, it's true.
Hey, Christian.
Christian Vogel is watching, which we always appreciate.
Hi, Christian.
Hey, Christian. He had a question that I liked, and first I'll give him the shout out, Christian. You're very right. I think that faith is not a sprint; it is a marathon, as Christian mentions in his comment. But he says that help from our brothers and sisters is also super instrumental in those times of faith. But his question is: any thoughts on how to balance donating versus investing? Which I think is a very interesting question.
Good question, Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. That's a good question. Yeah, I think, first of all, it starts with a mindset that, everything that we have, everything, we have, whether it be monetary or anything else, is a gift from God.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to look at it in terms of how we can best use that and seek God in the process. I think it's something to pray about. And I think, from a financial responsibility standpoint, it's good to save for your future and for the time when the time comes that you will retire, or if you have some unexpected expense that comes up, and being able to manage that. But you also, to the degree that you can, need to give generously.
Yeah.
Particularly to those areas where God is at work.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I hope I've answered Christian's question, but it's a good question, and it's one I think it needs to be considered prayerfully.
Yeah, for sure. I think the heart is a big component to that. I think Jesus is pretty clear in some of the parables and examples that he talks about. But I always think about the one woman who gave, the 2 pennies, if you will, as opposed to the bag of money. And the idea behind that being she gave all that she could, and that had more value than someone who just took pocket change and said, "Oh, I'll give this because look at me."
And you know what else is cool? I like the parable son. It reminds me of like, oh, can I have all your money, Dad? And then he spends it all, and then he goes in and eats like pig
Yeah,
food,
you're right.
And then he goes back and he celebrates.
Yeah, right. He wastes all that money, but then when he comes home, the father still celebrates him, right?
Yeah.
That's a very, very good example of us. We all do that a little bit in many different ways. But yeah, it's a good question and a good topic, and I'll give our older brother a little shout out. I stole his budget spreadsheet one time, and it still had his info in it, and I was gonna fill my info in or whatever. And so while deleting his stuff, I saw that he was super intentional about tithing on his gross income, not on his net income. And I thought that that small differentiating thing there showed more about his heart than I think anything did.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy, right, to say, well, I only actually got this much money, so I'm only going to tithe on that because that's really what I got, as opposed to saying, this is what I earned, this is what it said that I earned, then goes to taxes, but I have to take from that and give to the Lord. And I thought that was, really showed his heart in that situation. I appreciate that about him for sure.
And I would add that I think that giving goes beyond money too.
Yes.
I think it's all about having a heart of love and caring for others, whether it be through monetary help or us being quick to jump in and help somebody when they need it, in whatever form that takes.
So true.
And that's why they do offerings at church. I mean, I like that.
Yeah.
I think the churches really help each other out, and I think that's what we need.
Yeah, and I think, Ben, you're a pretty good example of Mr. Fullmer's point, in which you don't have these vast riches in which you can donate, but you have time, and you often do give your time.
I do. I volunteer at Hands and Service, for example.
Yeah.
They are a great organization through Calvary. They do a lot of stuff, and we talk about at Calvary, continue what Jesus started, and I feel like we need to use that model. Yeah. And then the next question, can we just...
So actually, Ben, I hate to do this.
I know.
But we've crazily got to our end time here. So what I like to do, Mr. Fullmer, is I like to kind of give the last couple minutes to our guests and just leave the soapbox, if you will, open for anything that's kind of on your heart that you want to share. So we'll leave the last couple minutes to you, and then we'll wrap it up. And crazy, our hour is done.
Okay. Do you want me to wrap up?
It's all the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, I just in closing, I would say, I'm so thankful for the Lord and the Lord's role in my life. I'm so thankful that He is constantly teaching us, reaching us, refining us. I am so thankful for so many things, and for anybody that's gone through a really difficult time, I would just ask that you just seek the Lord with all your heart, and know that He loves you with all His heart and wants to be there for you. And so I would like to close with that, because to God, that's where all the glory belongs.
Amen. That's great. And if you want to go get Mr. Fullmer's book, it's on Amazon. Yeah. And if you have any other questions, please email it to me. Yeah. Or if you want to reach out to Mr. Fullmer, you can go buy his book.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we always leave a history of our guests on our website. So we'll have a little blurb about Mr. Fullmer on there, and I'll add a link to his Amazon book on there as well. So you can always find that on the website. Mr. Fullmer, thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I mean, God, what did we just say? Bring this guy on us.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's perfect. It's exactly what we wanted and needed. And it was a great conversation. So thank you so much.
It was an honor being here.
We'll love it.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Fullmer, we will talk to you later.
Okay. God bless you guys.
You as well. We're good. We'll do this. Hold on. Steal. Do I have it there? Yeah, okay. Got it.
Oh, I was going to say something.
Right.
Oh.
So, thank you, everybody, for watching. We really appreciate you hopping on the show. Thank you for bearing with us with any crazy sound or camera stuff we got going on. It's all, as you know from last week, this is show 2 of our new set. So we are working with sound. I was editing the video for last week and saw that Ben was so quiet.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure at the beginning of this one I was quiet. So we're
still adjusting. We're still adjusting. Yeah.
But as the show progresses, we desire to continue to provide quality content. That has been my mantra. There's enough mediocre stuff on the internet.
Absolutely.
Provide something of quality.
So, Dan, did you hear about February 8th?
What's happening on February 8th, Ben?
We have a special guest.
Oh, yeah?
Mike Dempsey. And he might have a couple of NFL players coming on.
Because where's he going to be?
In L.A. At the Super Bowl.
At the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So we are going to find out who the players are. It'll be a surprise. We'll probably know the day of. But if you want to tell your friends to tune in that day.
Yeah, but what's different about that day as opposed to other days?
It's a Super Bowl week.
Right, but is Mike going to be at 7:30?
It's actually going to be at 7 or what earlier. Yeah,
so we're going to have it. It may be 6:30. So keep your eyes on those social media platforms. We're talking to Mike. He has this kind of open forum where people are coming in and talking to him and bringing him on shows. And so we got lucky enough to pull him in and talk to him. We're hoping for a full hour, but it may look closer to something to 6:30 to 7:30. So tune in for that. And we'll make sure that all the social medias have those updates.
Absolutely.
And our website for sure will have that update.
And we don't know who's NFL player is going to be on. It'll be a surprise.
Yeah. So once again, thank you everybody for watching.
Oh.
We really appreciate that. Ben's got something else.
I was going to say we have our next couple of guests lined up. We have We have a special guest coming in the next couple of weeks. I can't tell you; it's a secret.
Well, it's already on the website, isn't it?
And Rob Decker's coming on in the next couple of weeks. But we have somebody else. Should I say it now? Should I keep it? Reese Steinberg, the NFL agent, is going to be on in a couple of weeks, and Regina from Pennsbury is going to be on. So I'm pretty excited. I'm hoping to get some more other guests, and don't forget to go to the Dine for Donate this Sunday at New Britain Inn in Chalfont. So go support Eagles Autism Challenge. And I'm just going to end with my quote, guys. Having autism is really not a bad thing. It doesn't characterize who we are. Everybody is unique and special, just like a rainbow. I want to thank Mr. Fullmer. I want to thank everybody. And I love you guys, and be kind out there. Good night.